Well, guys, I did it. I finally beat Cyberpunk 2077. Within the first month of the game's release, I was able to complete my first playthrough. It wasn't a full 100% all quests playthrough, but I did do all of the main story, obviously, and a large chunk of side quests and a few gigs. Basically, I did everything that appealed to me. And then once I felt I was sufficiently, following all of the storylines, I went ahead and did the Point of No Return final quest. And looking at my log right now, I clocked just about 50 hours in the game. So 50 hours in my first ever playthrough of Cyberpunk 2077. Like many others, Cyberpunk 2077 was one of my most anticipated games in the past few years. I admit that I have been very, very excited for this game. I did a lot of personal hype for it, and I also went to several gaming events in the past 2 to 3 years that, E3, the year that Keanu Reeves was there, I saw a preview, like a 30-minute demo of the game at E3. I got that cool Cyberpunk jacket. I went to PAX West in 2019 where there was like a IGN Cyberpunk cosplay party, and I dressed up and went on stage for the Cyberpunk cosplay contest and met a bunch of really cool people who were also, really excited for Cyberpunk. Mike Pondsmith was there. People from CDPR were there. It was a really exciting time. And that was back when we all thought it was coming out in April 2020. I'm saying all of this to explain that I was extremely excited for this game on, very high levels of hype. And with that, the question is, did the game live up to my hype levels and all of my expectations? I would say yes, it did. But there's definitely things to discuss and things that I want to talk about, what I liked, what I didn't like, and just overall my feelings, because it took me a day to process the end of the game and just kind of like really process everything, because it was really a journey. And I just want to talk about it. Before I get into sharing my thoughts and opinions on the game, I just want to say that I will not be discussing any of the problematic things surrounding Cyberpunk 2077 and its initial launch. There's a lot of things that could be said about that, and I have formed my own conclusions and my own thoughts and opinions on everything that went down with Cyberpunk 2077's launch and some of the issues that people have with the game. If you don't know what I'm talking about, by the way, just do a Google search. As a matter of fact, do a Twitter or Reddit search of Cyberpunk, and you can look that up and make your own informed decisions, because I highly encourage people to do that. Do your research and make decisions and conclusions based on that research. I will not be discussing any of that in this video. This video is just all about the game itself and my experience and my journey through the game's content. So like I said earlier, I am a big fan of the Cyberpunk universe. Obviously, Cyberpunk is also a genre that many things could be considered cyberpunk, such as Blade Runner, Altered Carbon, etc., etc. And I think some people actually get confused when they hear the word cyberpunk, because the game is called Cyberpunk, but it does not encompass the cyberpunk genre. Cyberpunk 2077 was based off of a tabletop pen and paper role-playing game that's been around since the late 80s, early 90s. I've explained this in my videos, I've explained this on my streams, but I want to make it clear for any new people who may have not already known that. I think that some people that I talked to, some friends and mutuals online, actually weren't aware until very recently that Cyberpunk is based off of a previous IP, which is the tabletop RPG universe created by R. Talsorian Games and Mike Pondsmith. As you guys know, I also am a huge fan of tabletop role-playing games, and that includes Cyberpunk 2020 and Cyberpunk Red. So it's just, this whole world colliding for me as a player of tabletop RPGs and a player of video games. This is like the perfect hybrid for me. So that's another reason why this is so exciting for me as a fan of role-playing games because it kind of meshes both my worlds together. I'm also just, in general, a huge fan of the lore of the Cyberpunk world. Going into it, I knew a lot of the backstory of Johnny Silverhand and Rogue and Alt Cunningham. So seeing these popular names, Carrie Eurodyne, Bess Isis, it was like a nerd heaven for me as somebody who, you know, already knows about these characters from the tabletop game. It just was so cool to see them in video game form, just seeing their characters in the future in 2077 and what's happened to them, and just seeing them and interacting with them was just I was a fangirl. I remember the first time seeing Rogue, the first Johnny Silverhand mission, when you are infiltrating Arasaka. It's a flashback of Johnny's life. So seeing him and his crew, so there's 2 missions that you do as Johnny Silverhand's flashbacks. The first one is the assault on Arasaka Tower, where they try to blow it up. They don't successfully do that, and that's where Johnny dies, quote unquote. Oh no, we get to play Johnny! Oh no, this is Johnny! It's Rogue! Oh my... I love that this game lets us play as Johnny and do this whole assault on Arasaka Tower. This is the coolest thing. Sorry, I can't get over how cool this actually is. Oh my gosh. And the second one is Johnny recruiting Rogue and Thompson and, you know, the gang to try to save Alt Cunningham after she gets kidnapped by Arasaka. Oh my god!
Fuck. Is it the concert or Carrie?
Ah! It's Alt! No! Oh.
Johnny!
These are the Arasaka guys. I think they kidnap Alt for Arasaka. The Soul Killer is a really prominent thing in Cyberpunk 2020, and Alt Cunningham, that whole mission is actually a mission you can play in your own Cyberpunk 2020 tabletop games. I had already read about this whole mission in the Cyberpunk 2020 core rulebook, so, you know, being able to play it in this video game, oh my gosh, guys, I was just, blown away at how cool that was. These are things that I really appreciated as a fan, that I know that probably not every person appreciated it as much as I did, but I know there's a lot of you out there who are also big fans of Cyberpunk, so you know, also can really appreciate that. But it's just funny when I was talking to just some of my friends who aren't really into it as much as me, were like, oh yeah, I mean, I guess that was cool. And I'm like, you guess it was cool? We literally got to play the mission where Johnny tries to save Alt. We literally got to see Adam Smasher and Johnny fight. It was like, oh my gosh. Okay, I need to collect myself. In conclusion, all of the stuff that pays tribute to Cyberpunk 2020 was really freaking cool. Okay, so I kind of got a little bit ahead of myself there. I tried to outline this video as much as possible, but I sometimes just ramble and kind of go all over the place, so don't expect things to be completely cohesive here. So really, what I want to do is talk about things in the game that I liked and things that I didn't like. So let's start with the good stuff first, and then we can get into some of the negatives as well. And then I want to talk about the ending that I got and just all of the endings in general. So first, the things that I liked. Obviously, what I talked about earlier, the number one thing that I liked was the connection of the Cyberpunk tabletop world and all of the lore of the Cyberpunk universe into this game. And to me, it was a lot of fan service. The Carrie Eurodyne missions were some of my favorite missions because that was nothing but fan service for me. Probably one of my all-time favorite missions, and it's really hard to pick a favorite mission, but definitely my favorite mission was getting Samurai back together and performing on stage as V as Johnny with Carrie and Bess and the whole gang. And the song that you play is Like a Supreme by Samurai, and it was just a really, really cool thing. I loved that mission, and I loved all of Carrie's missions. He was one of my favorites in the game itself. So yeah, the total fan service is my number one thing that I liked the most. And there is a ton more fan service that I could probably ramble about all the little things that were little homages to Cyberpunk. Maximum Mike on the radio is Mike Pondsmith. Him talking on the radio, the first time I heard him, I think I just was like so excited. I was like, oh, it's Mike Pondsmith, everybody. I don't think anybody in my Twitch chat knew. I think like maybe 2 people understood my excitement, but everybody else was just like, okay. But you know, stuff like that was really, really exciting. Number 2, my second favorite thing that I loved about the game is all of the companions and all of V's friends that he or she makes along the way. One of my number 1 things that I love the most about RPGs is having characters that you can really connect with and fall in love with. And I don't mean that always in a romantic way, but of course I do love romance as well. But just saying, like, you could develop friendships and meaningful relationships with characters that have really compelling stories, that is absolutely a make it or break it for me in RPGs. If we look at some of my other favorite RPGs, obviously Mass Effect, The Witcher, Divinity, what do all those games have in common? They have awesome companions that you can recruit into your party and connect with and just, you know, really get to know these characters. And it comes to a point where if you lose them in the end, you feel devastated as a player because you don't want to lose these people. You love them, you know? So all of the characters in Cyberpunk 2077, or at least all of V's friends, are extremely endearing, and I loved all of them. It's really hard for me to do like a power ranking, but I'd have to say for me, number 1 is definitely Judy. I romanced Judy, so she was my number 1. Then number 2, probably Takemura. I loved him. He was great and so much fun. Number 3, Panam, of course. I don't think I've met a single person who didn't like Panam. We all fell in love with Panam. That's without question. And I am no different. And it's funny for me because I talk to a lot of my guy friends who play a male V, and they all romanced Panam, and, you know, talk about how much they love her. But I gotta say, I actually enjoyed like the genuine friendship that female V and female Panam make in the game. Like, for me, it's like, it's not romantic, but we just had like a really genuine friendship throughout all of the missions that we did together. And I just really loved having Panam as a friend, and it didn't have to be romantic. It was just really cool. Then number 4, Carrie Eurodyne. Carrie is hilarious and great, and oh my gosh, like, he's like this, like, they did a great job portraying this like washed up musician who's still really full of himself, but also like kind of lovable. You know, they really could have missed the mark with Carrie. Like, they could have made him either really annoying or really lame, but honestly, I think that Carrie's character was really endearing, and I really liked him. If I play in my next playthrough, when I play as male V, I am going to be romancing Carrie. I thought Carrie was a male V exclusive. Carrie doesn't swing. Yeah, I didn't think he did. He's gonna be like, bruh, lay off. I'm really scared to see the rejection dialogue that is to follow this.
I'll even protect you from yourself.
Carrie's like, nah, B.
Fuck. Sorry, V. I like you lots, but this ain't going anywhere.
Oh.
Johnny just laughing at me.
No worries. Sorry. Never mind.
Thanks, though. For everything.
It goes without saying, Rogue is absolutely one of my favorite characters in the Cyberpunk universe in general. I love everything that they did with Rogue in 2077. I love her attitude. I love the afterlife, and that she's just the queen fixer of Night City. She is such a badass, and I just absolutely adore her. Then number 6, I would say, is River. I did actually really like River as well. Doing his quests, I found them to be extremely interesting, and I just kind of really, you know, I did have a lot of fun doing all of River's quests, and he's another one who I genuinely liked, you know, developing a relationship with, a friendship. Oh, and also Claire. I really loved doing Claire's side stories. Her racing missions were very entertaining and very fun. She was also another side character that I just really enjoyed and loved playing all of her quest line. So yeah, you know, CDPR does a really good job at this. They do a really good job at creating side quests that are not just like annoying side quests that you feel like you have to complete for the sake of completing. All of the side quests that I did, and mind you, I didn't do every single side quest, but most of the side quests are extremely interesting and compelling. They have just as much meat as the main storyline, in my opinion. Having those really interesting side quests, I think, makes the game like all the more better, because it's not all about doing the main story. It's really about the side stories. And I spent 3 or 4 streams just doing everybody's side quests, and I was just hooked in. I was looking forward to it more than the main quests at some point. So that's another sign, in my opinion, of a successful RPG, when you can make a lot of really great content in your main story, but also in some of the side stuff as well. And with that, talking about the side quests, one other thing that I found interesting, and I will say that I liked, is the fact that you kind of had to wait between each mission line for each of the main, you know, side characters. For example, if you do a quest with Judy, you finish that quest, you can't immediately do the next Judy quest. So it's not like you can grind out the entire Judy side story side quests. You have to wait in between each for Judy to give you a call. So once I finished a Judy quest, I would go and do one of Claire's quests and then finish that and go do maybe Pan Am's quest, and then, you know, Judy would call me and then go back to do a Judy mission. So it adds a bit of realism to the world, because really, like, it's true, I have to wait a day or two for Judy to call me back. It's not like I'm gonna be able to immediately do the next quest. In RPGs of years past, you probably could just grind out an entire side storyline and be done with it and move on. But for Cyberpunk 2077, that's just not the case. You have to wait. Now, in theory, you could probably like skip time and just wait a few days and then get the call and continue, which maybe some people do, but for me, I was busy enough to want to do other quests. And so I was okay with just, you know, finishing the story with Pan Am, leaving, doing some stuff in Night City, Pan Am calls me again, and then I head out to meet her. The next thing that I absolutely loved was Johnny Silverhand. Basically, Johnny Silverhand and him in all of your quests, basically. Going into Cyberpunk 2077, I knew the premise of the story, that Johnny Silverhand is, you know, a part of you and your life as V. But I didn't really know what the extent of that was going to be. I honestly thought, really, that Johnny was just going to be part of the main quest line. And, you know, V trying to figure out how to get Johnny out of her head. And yeah, Johnny would really only be part of those main quests. I was very pleasantly surprised to see that Johnny was appearing and popping up in just about every side quest that you do. He had dialogue and things to say, and he would interact with the world in so many different quests, and I really thought that was so cool. And I think that really added, again, to the realism of this world, where this character who is a part of V isn't just there for one quest line. He's there for your whole journey. He will sit in the back of the car while you're talking with Claire. He will be there making commentary while you're at the afterlife with Rogue. Having Johnny around and having all of his snarky remarks and commentary just made the game so much more fun for me, and I just think it was such a really great thing to have in the game. I I just loved it. I loved the whole experience. The last thing I guess that I really liked was just the main story in general. I thought that the story was actually really good. I thought it was really compelling. The backgrounds didn't really seem to have as much significance as I thought that they would. Really, it only matters for how you start your journey, but you always end up in the same place, whether you pick Corpo, Nomad, or Street Kid. It's really just like your starting point and then just certain dialogue options, which is cool. I thought they would have more. But I loved the Act 1 with Jackie. I really thought that it was a strong start to A, get you familiar with the world if you're not already familiar, and B, give you a reason to do what you're doing. And I think Jackie was a really good crutch for the story, and his death was very impactful for V as a character and really, pushed her throughout the entire game. I just thought it was a really solid opening to Cyberpunk 2077. I gotta say, like, one of my favorite missions on the main quest line was the last one with Jackie when you are invading the tower and trying to steal the chip, and you see Saburo Arasaka get murdered by his son. It was such a tense and incredible moment. I didn't even see it coming at first. Well, I saw something coming at first, but it was a big twist for me that I was really enjoying in the moment. To distract him. Oh god, Adam Smasher is here. Oh god!
The Emperor.
This is
Another Aztecan legend.
This is so intense. Say to your son. Oh! 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 Oh!
誰のことも許す必要はない。
Oh no! Don't! No! He just killed his father? No! No way! Another thing that I really liked in this game is the photo mode. If you watched my streams, you will know that this is kind of a meme now. The photo mode was probably like my most used thing in this game. I found so many opportunities to take great photos in Cyberpunk 2077, and I am honestly so glad that they had this feature in the game, because there were so many moments that just called for a photo op, and I think they actually added so much detail to the photo mode, almost like too much detail, because there were like a ton of stickers that at first I thought were cool, but I ended up just not using any of the stickers, so I feel like that was a little excessive. But having a photo mode was so cool. I was able to capture so many cool moments, and I was able to take photos with all of these cool characters that I love. I keep saying that I want to make a scrapbook somehow of all of my favorite photos from the game, because I really think I captured some great moments and some really cool photos and some funny moments as well. So just being able to have that photo mode, I honestly just thought it was so cool. And now that we've talked about all the positive things and all the flowery happiness, let's talk about the things that I didn't like. And there are quite a few things that I really did not like in this game. Most of the stuff is really just more mechanical and not so much about the story, which is really good for me because, as I always say, story first, gameplay second. Story first, gameplay second. This game nailed it on the story. The gameplay and some of the mechanics, not so much, in my opinion. Number one thing that I didn't like or didn't care for was crafting. I really don't know why they added crafting to Cyberpunk. I understand having crafting in a game like The Witcher. I don't understand having crafting in a game like Cyberpunk. I guess it's a cool thing that some gamers like to do. I personally have no feelings toward crafting whatsoever. I did do it in The Witcher 3 quite a bit, but I did not get into it in this game, and from what I'm hearing from people, it is incredibly complicated, and I'm glad I didn't get into it. I was able to have fun with the game with the weapons that were given to me and the gear that was given to me, and I felt no reason whatsoever to do any sort of crafting. If crafting is your thing, that's great. Thumbs up. I personally think it was totally unnecessary and overly complicated. And with that, another thing that I kind of didn't really care for and thought was totally unnecessary was the amount of freaking rides that you could try to get. Oh my gosh. I don't know if there's a person out there who's going to try to get every car in the game, but it was just, in my opinion, an excessive amount of vehicles that you could acquire. Again, that's probably something that a lot of people really like. For example, games like Grand Theft Auto, I don't really play GTA, but it gave me heavy GTA vibes. And I know that Cyberpunk is more action adventure nowadays than it is RPG. They originally advertised Cyberpunk 2077 as a roleplay, as an RPG. Then they kind of changed it very subtly to action adventure game. Things like getting rides kind of played more into like the GTA side of things that I don't really care for. And honestly, really, you get a lot of really great rides from quests in the game, and I was totally happy with the cars that I had. I was able to acquire Johnny Silverhand's Porsche. I got the Scorpion bike from Pan Am, and that's the one that I ended up using the most in the game. I used that bike the most. I even found the hidden car that was like the really nice car. There's just a lot of cars that you can get from quests that I just found it totally unnecessary to buy any vehicles. There were a few vehicles that were propositioned that I thought were cool, but I just had no desire to actually acquire them. It felt like overkill, and that maybe they could have spent resources on other things in the game, not so much all of the different rides. The next thing, again, I'm getting into a lot of more mechanical things in the game, but the next thing that I really didn't like in Cyberpunk 2077 were the brain dances. And as a matter of fact, I remember when they showed their first Night City wire of brain dances, and I watched it and I was just like, this doesn't seem that cool. I mean, it's a cool idea in theory, but I think it was implemented poorly. First of all, the mechanics were extremely wonky, and there were several brain dances that I did that were also very buggy. That was already kind of like setting me off to brain dances, but just in general, like having to tab through and rewind and fast forward and try to scan and find precise things, I found it incredibly mundane and I just hated it. And then, you know, the last thing I guess is that I know I said I wasn't going to really talk about this, but there were some things that felt kind of really buggy and felt rushed. I could definitely tell the game was a rushed game. I did one of the endings, the Pan Am ending, and there were a ton of bugs in that ending. And so you could just tell that the game was rushed. I guess maybe if I played this a few years later, or, you know, at least even a few months later, I probably would have had a different experience. I didn't personally have any game-changing bugs. Like, I know some people had Dum Dum follow them around everywhere, or just some things where it was just, like, constantly crashing. I didn't really experience that. Probably the most annoying thing for me was audio crackling that happened pretty frequently while I was streaming, but it would kind of fix itself. I wouldn't say it totally soured my experience, but it just, you know, it made it a less pleasant experience. All right, so now I want to talk about the ending. First of all, I want to talk about the ending that I got, and then some of the other endings. And like, these endings, man, they were crazy. Oh my gosh. I got the Silverhand ending, and by that I mean I chose to go with Johnny's plan to go with Rogue to Arasaka Tower, and then at the end I decided to let Johnny take over V's body. And I want to say that I knew that this was a bad decision. I kind of wanted tragedy in my playthrough. I wanted the tragic story. And the minute I heard Johnny saying, I want Rogue, let's do this, I was just like, this is gonna go just as horribly as all the other assaults the two of them have done on Arasaka Tower. This is not gonna work out. But in a way, it was almost like a homage to the old Cyberpunk games that I love and that I already talked about earlier. So to me, that was like the most Cyberpunk ending. You know, Johnny Silverhand and Rogue taking on Arasaka once again. That was like the cool Cyberpunk ending that I wanted. So I was completely happy with my ending, despite it being what some would say one of the more bad endings. And and Johnny, taking over V's body was incredibly tragic and sad, but I think it was some of the most beautiful storytelling in all of the endings, honestly. The final cutscene between, when Johnny is in V's body is absolutely beautiful and brought me to tears. And if you haven't watched it or experienced it for yourself, I highly recommend going and watching it because it is beautiful. The final scene with Johnny interacting with the kid with the guitar was just incredibly moving. Johnny going to the cemetery and seeing V and Rogue's graves and leaving items for that was also incredibly moving and touching. And it, just thinking about it right now is even getting me kind of emotional because it was incredibly emotional and just blew me away. That ending just kind of totally I'm already getting emotional just thinking about it. It was so good. And that's when I truly knew that this game was legendary and was a game that was going to be legendary because it just blew me away emotionally with its storytelling. So that was just amazing. It was tragic and sad, but it was, in my opinion, the best ending. Now, let's talk about the actual quote-unquote best ending, which a lot of people would say is going with Pan Am and the Nomads and doing that ending. V, potentially only having 6 months to live, leaves Night City with her new family and the person she loves. For me, that was Judy. It was bittersweet in a way because you really don't know what's going to happen to them. You don't know if V is going to die in 6 months from now and everybody will be really sad. It leaves a bittersweet feeling in your heart. But in a way, it is more sweet than bitter because you get to see Pan Am, you get to see Judy, and you get to know that you get to be with the people you love in the end. V doesn't have to sacrifice herself for this, and she gets to be with the people she cares about most in the end. For me, I ended up playing that ending after I finished my first ending, and I'm happy that I ended on a good note. I'm happy I ended my, the end of my Cyberpunk playthrough on a good note because, the other one was incredibly sad, but this one was much more happy, and I did like it. Then I went and watched all the other endings, and wow. 2 of those were probably worse in my opinion. Let's talk about the other good ending that you can have. That's the super secret ending where you and Johnny can do a solo assault on Arasaka. That is a pretty badass ending, but also incredibly hard. And so apparently you need 70% relationship with Johnny, and I was only at 60%, which also doesn't make sense to me because I went back and I feel like I made all the right decisions with Johnny, so I must have went wrong somewhere. Even at the grave, when you're, visiting Johnny's grave, I picked what people would say would be the right answer for that. And, I feel like I really was kind of a suck up to Johnny throughout my entire playthrough, but somehow I still didn't get to 70% with him. But regardless, I probably would not have wanted to do the solo assault because that I watched some playthrough of it and I was like, man, this looks really difficult. I'm good. But it's a really cool and satisfying ending if you are able to do that. And you can become a freaking legend, which I think is also really cool. I love the idea of V becoming the new owner of the afterlife after all of this happens, but it's really bittersweet because if you do romance somebody, they leave and you are stuck, at the afterlife. It's a cool ending for V, and I think it's also a really cool cyberpunk ending. Being able to own the afterlife, that's a very satisfying ending, in my opinion. But it also kind of sucks because V can't be with the person that he or she loves because of all this, and I'm just like, man, that's kind of an unsatisfying ending in some ways as well. But it is Cyberpunk, and I don't think any of these endings are meant to be 100% happy. Cyberpunk is called The Dark Future, and if there was any ending that was a perfectly bow-wrapped, bow-tie, happy ending, I would actually probably be more mad. But I'm actually happy that every ending had a little bit of bittersweet. And then there are the 2 endings that I think are just horrible. The first one is if you do the Arasaka ending, which I'm glad I didn't pick this because I was considering picking it. The idea of the ending is really cool, But you go up to the orbital station for Arasaka, and you can either sign a deal to place your mind in Soul Killer, basically, and get a new body eventually and live on. Or you can choose to go back to Earth and live with the people you love with only 6 months to live, because again, this procedure is not successful. And V's not gonna live. Signing your life away, I love that it says, like, surrender to Arasaka. Like, literally the option for you to choose says surrender to Arasaka, where the game is really telling you that you're surrendering yourself to the bad guys, quote unquote. And it's, like, really, like, depressing and compelling at the same time. In my opinion, I would consider that probably the worst ending, or one of the worst endings, probably worse than the ending that I chose, but it's also just interesting that you could go that route if you wanted to. In all of the different endings, V interacts with the necklace that he or she has with the bullet, and I just love, it's very symbolic, and I just love the symbolism, so I thought it was cool. And then there's the other really bad ending where you could just suicide yourself before even doing anything and just die, which is a viable option, but I have to say, I watched it, and the credits scene where you get to see all of your friends talking about you taking your own life is some of the absolutely most hardest thing to watch. And I actually feel that CD Projekt Red, I'm actually shaming them for this. They probably should have put some sort of trigger warning, or just a warning, a content warning before this, because it is incredibly dark, incredibly sad, and incredibly horrible. It puts into perspective what suicide does to friends and family and the people you love, and it's incredibly real and gut-wrenching. And I watched it and I felt horrible after watching it. It was incredibly sad, really. And seeing how each of your friends processes V's suicide is just gut-wrenching, but incredibly real to what suicide is. So it's almost a lesson. But I also wish they would have had a content warning before that, because it was a lot, honestly. It was a lot to emotionally take in. So I will say that all of the post-credits, I watched basically like every post-credit call from every character that you could have, and I loved that little thing that they added at the end. I thought it was really cool to add, and that you get different responses from different friends based on the ending that you chose, and seeing how all of your friends interact with you, whether you're gone or you're still here, it's really moving. And that just adds to some of the things that I praised the game for earlier, is again these relationships that you develop with characters, seeing how it all comes to fruition at the end, and seeing how things conclude with your friends at the end is just like really, really great, and something that I really enjoyed in the game. So yeah, it wouldn't be a CDPR game if you didn't have alternate endings and good and bad endings, and and all is up to interpretation. Very much like the Witcher 3 endings, you can interpret some of those endings as good or bad, but somebody else could interpret other endings differently. And it's all up to you and how you view it. And that's one thing that I love the most about these types of games, is how we all interpret the story that's laid out in front of us. And we can all interpret things very differently. I thought my ending was the best ending, and some people might think it wasn't, so... So, I don't like to give number ratings for games. I never give number ratings for games. I guess I'd maybe give Cyberpunk an 8.5 out of 10, maybe a 9 out of 10. There's the mechanical things that didn't make it as fun. I still think The Witcher 3 is probably my favorite CD Projekt Red game. I don't like to directly compare the two, but if I'm just looking at CDPR as a developer, I still think The Witcher 3 holds more to my heart. But Cyberpunk 2077 was a really incredible game. And, it saddens me that there was a lot of things about the game and its release that people, it gave people enough reason to never want to play the game, because I really want this game to have like an incredible dedicated fandom like some other games and universes have. Like, I want to see this game succeed and have a strong core fan base like The Witcher does, like Mass Effect does, like all of these other games do. I want Cyberpunk to have that as well. We'll see where things go. You know, maybe the game will, a year from now, will just be irrelevant and people will be like, oh yeah, remember Cyberpunk? Yeah, we played that game. So with that, I have talked a lot, and I've shared a lot of thoughts. I've had a lot of emotions. I want to hear your thoughts, so tell me if you loved the game, if you hated it. Tell me what you liked and didn't like. I'm always happy to talk about those things with people. I'm in Discord. In my Discord, we have conversations in a Cyberpunk channel, so feel free to chat there as well. So I think that's it, guys. You know, I feel a lot better being able to share all of this and get this all off my chest, you know? So I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching. Bye.